So that's the president of the Africa Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina. Let's get more on where we are at this conference now with the BBC's environment reporter, Navin Singh Khadka. Navin, let's just start with President Obama first. He was the big draw for today. A lot of people that I spoke to said, well, he could have done more while he was in office. Is that fair criticism?
Well, definitely yes. I mean, not if you compare to what happened during the Trump administration, but certainly, yes, there could have been things done much more. But people are also talking about what was back then, how he could get in China. Remember, just before Paris, he had a one-on-one with the Chinese president, and that's how the deal was sealed. But now, that is somehow not the case, and China, as you know, has been a major challenge here.
Okay, so maybe he did more than is being done. Now let's talk about what's happening here at COP26. Last week we saw these flurry of deals. Just remind us what happened last week.
All right, so as we all know now, that there were one after another big announcements, and the concern was that those announcements were very good. Some of them were being criticized, but some of them were also being welcomed. Now the question here is, see, this particular thing, this summit is, it's a UN climate process, and there are certain tracks, processes. So the question is how those agreements, whatever were announced, how will they be assimilated into this process, and will it get through? That is where we are. So one after another announcements, and what we heard from the president of COP this morning was, by and large, it looks okay. But if you spoke to some other people, other quarters, then they would say, well, announcements were really good, but in the real track, there have been problems.
So what can we expect this week then? I know ministers have come in from all over the world. They came in over the weekend, and they will be having their own meetings now. What will they be trying to do?
So you see, like I said, what the announcements and also the aspirations, do they meet? Because, announcements were made and they made some people happy, but some people are not happy about it because they think that they are not getting what they wanted. For example, finance, big announcement on private finance. But if you listen to poor countries, developing countries, many of them are saying that private finance is good, but that would go for, most of them will go for cutting down emissions, for solar panels, wind turbines, but we want for adaptation, for our people to survive, to come out of all these problems, to minimize the damages. And yesterday only we spoke to the Green Climate Fund head. The BBC did an interview, and he was on the record telling us that climate investment in adaptation is very, very little compared to mitigation. So you see that kind of difference. So as a result, you're hearing that there's no adaptation on the agenda. We're not getting money for adaptation. That is where the UN process is trying to secure. If it happens, then yes.
In the midst of all these arguments as well, African countries complaining that their needs have actually been reduced to a mere footnote at this conference. Have they got a point?
That is where I'm talking about, adaptation or even loss and damage, for instance. A representative, a negotiator from Guinea, for instance, was telling us, we done a report today, which is out on the BBC website, about how poor countries are accusing rich countries of being pushed, the rich countries are pushing them back in terms of claims for loss and damages. So what they're saying is that the demands for adaptation finance or loss and damage finance is not being addressed, and it's most of the time it's about emission reductions. And we have just this report now saying that some African countries they are already using up to 9% of their GDP to deal with adaptation, and there's no money
already.
Yeah.
Okay, Navin, thank you very much. Always good to get your insight into these stories. And I do advise you to look for that article that Navin mentioned, written by him on where we are so far on this COP26 summit. It's on the BBC website.